So Tom, the first question is, what is the situation on the market from your viewpoint?
Sure. So in the U.S. markets, a lot of people are concerned with valuations. The S&P PE multiple is up over 24 recently, and people are concerned that maybe they've missed the move or they want to wait for a pullback to get invested. But I think people are misguided. I think that it is true that the long-term PE for the S&P, if you go back to 1881, it's like 16.6, so 20 would be very richly valued. Some people say, well, if you start from 1946, which is the World War II era, then they say that maybe it should only be 15. So in both cases, historically, mathematically, it could be a bit rich. But I would also remind people that it's also in comparison to the bond yields, right? Because investors have two choices, equities and fixed income. And if the US 10-year is artificially depressed, multi-year lows, then potentially you have to make an adjustment for that. And so 2.18, I guess, this morning on the 10-year is by many measures artificially depressed. You know, there's a global search for yield, very low yields in Europe, sometimes negative yields. So anything above 2 in the US is very attractive, and you have some very large institutional investors, pension funds, buying the 10-year in very large quantities. And so the 10-year is by many means artificially low, which would mean that the default would be equities, which would be a little bit high. So I don't really feel that the US equity market is necessarily overvalued. I would say that there is a discussion as to how much of the Trump trade or the Trump fiscal stimulus plan is affecting the markets, and it's safe to say at this point there's zero built into the market for that. So any valuations on the S&P are based purely on earnings or earnings expectations, and if there comes news that potentially tax reform or even just tax cuts or the fiscal stimulus plan that he wants to implement, if there becomes news that that will become available, then that would just be an additional boost to the equity markets in the US.
Thank you. And the second question, what is the main point or issue what Wall Street looking in Washington regarding economy agenda or some signs that everything good or not good?
Well, it's kind of interesting because it was only a couple years ago that it was very obvious to everyone, and even the Fed was saying the Fed has done all they can do. We really need Washington to implement fiscal stimulus. And then we elect a new administration who plans to implement fiscal stimulus, and it's not quite happening yet, and people are constantly doing the math of when will it happen, when will Congress come to an agreement, when can they pass these measures. And the current view is that it just doesn't look like 2017 is on the table at all. There are some who say that we should start getting signs at the end of 2017, and as we know, the financial markets trade ahead on anticipated actions. So if the news starts to come out that it might happen in 2018, then we could see some additional rally at the back end of 2017. But for right now, most of the markets believe that it's just not going to happen, or whatever happens will be so watered down that the benefit will not be that dramatic.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.